The first time Ivan Mikhailov saw the German medic, he already had his finger on the trigger. The ruins of the city lay spread out below his position like the skeleton of something that had once been alive and loud and warm. Now it was a maze of broken stone and smoke, split open by artillery and stitched together by the constant crack of rifles. Ivan lay on the third floor of a shattered apartment building, his Mosin Nagant resting on a sandbag, the cold biting even through his gloves. Through the scope, the world narrowed into a tunnel of glass and breath fog. He had been told the Germans were preparing another push along the main street, that officers, spotters, and medics were all valid targets. "Anything that keeps them fighting," his commander had said. "Anything that helps them stand back up, kill it." So when Ivan saw the white armband with the red cross appear in his scope, his muscles reacted before his thoughts. The cross moved cautiously between the wrecked cars and craters, attached to a tall, thin man with a medical satchel slung over one shoulder. A medic. German. Enemy. Ivan exhaled, body shifting into the familiar rhythm of a shot. But then the medic stopped. Not at a fallen soldier, not at a tank, but beside a woman in a torn coat kneeling over a small shape in the snow. A child's hand. Too small to be holding a rifle. The woman was Russian. No uniform, no weapon, just raw panic in her eyes. The medic knelt beside the child, ignoring the bullets cracking in the distance. Ivan watched, frowning, as the German set his satchel down and began working quickly, his movements efficient and practiced. He checked the boy's breathing, cut away bloodied fabric, wrapped bandages with shaking but steady hands. The woman clutched at his sleeve, begging in a language he shouldn't understand, but somehow the meaning crossed the rubble between them. "Please, help him." Ivan's scope wavered. He corrected it, drawing a bead on the medic's head. One bullet, he knew, would open that skull like an egg. One bullet and the child would be alone again in the ruins. The thought irritated him. This was not his job. His job was to kill the enemy from a distance, unseen, efficient, a shadow with a rifle. Medics, too. He had been told that more than once. "Shoot the medic and the man you didn't kill today might die tomorrow," the instructor had said back at training. That had made cruel sense to him then. But here, now, through the glass, the logic slid sideways. The boy's face appeared in the scope as the medic lifted him slightly, sliding something under his back to keep him off the frozen ground. The child's lips were blue, his breathing shallow. The mother's hands fluttered uselessly, torn between helping and not knowing how. For a moment, Ivan forgot there was a city around them at all. Forgot the artillery, the orders, even his commander's gravel-thick voice. All he saw was a German kneeling in the snow, sleeves already stained with other people's blood, saving a Russian child who would grow up either hating him or never knowing his face. Ivan's finger tightened on the trigger. The crosshair touched the medic's temple, then drifted to his chest, then to the satchel at his side. He could end this man's work with one shot. He could follow orders. He could be what the war had made him. But as the medic bent lower, shielding the boy from the wind with his own body, Ivan felt something inside him shift, small, stubborn, and dangerously alive. Ivan lowered his rifle an inch, then raised it again, battling the instinct drilled into him by months of killing. The ruined building around him groaned as the winter wind pushed through shattered windows. carrying the distant thud of artillery like a heartbeat beneath the snow. He shifted slightly, adjusting his position, forcing his mind back into the cold precision expected of a sniper. Yet through the scope, the scene below refused to become an enemy target. The German medic had lifted the injured boy into his arms now, cradling him as gently as if he were made of glass. The woman, his mother, Ivan assumed, walked beside him, one hand on the medic's sleeve, the other trembling uncontrollably. Ivan tracked them with the rifle, breath slowed, posture steady. He could pull the trigger now. The medic's exposed back filled the crosshairs perfectly. The shot would be clean, swift, a kill so easy it felt like a trap. But the boy's head rested weakly on the medic's shoulder, his small hand twitching as if clutching at life itself. If Ivan fired, the child would fall into the snow, bleed out, freeze, die, and somehow that possibility filled Ivan with a discomfort he couldn't swallow. "It's war," he whispered to himself, as if saying it aloud would make the decision easier. War meant killing strangers you would never meet. War meant ignoring the part of you that remembered faces. War meant following orders, not empathy. His commander's voice echoed in his memory. "Do not think. Thinking makes you slow. Slow snipers die." Ivan tightened his jaw. Below, the medic reached a half-collapsed doorway and carefully laid the child down on a piece of torn fabric. He worked quickly, checking the boy's pulse, adjusting the bandages he'd wrapped earlier. The woman hovered over them, wiping tears from her dirt-streaked face. A shell exploded in the distance, sending a tremor through the rubble. The medic didn't flinch. He simply positioned his body to shield the boy from falling debris. Ivan frowned through the scope. This man didn't move like a soldier obeying orders. He moved like someone fighting the war in his own quiet way, one life at a time. A group of German infantry rounded the corner suddenly, boots crunching through broken glass. Ivan's rifle snapped toward them on instinct. They shouted something at the medic, gestures sharp, voices harsh with urgency. The medic replied, shaking his head firmly. One of the soldiers stepped forward, frustrated, pointing at the street ahead. The medic countered with a gesture toward the child, his voice sharpened with defiance. Even from this distance, Ivan recognized that tone. The medic was refusing to abandon the boy. That alone was enough to get him shot by his own men. Ivan's pulse quickened. If the Germans turned on their medic, chaos would follow. Chaos meant unpredictable movement. Unpredictable movement meant civilians getting caught in crossfire. He steadied the rifle again, the crosshair resting now on the German soldier yelling at the medic. He could intervene. One shot would scatter them, give the medic time, maybe save the child. But helping a German? Helping the enemy? The idea twisted in his chest like a blade. Below, the medic suddenly lifted the boy again, ignoring the arguments, and pushed past the soldiers. The woman followed closely, her hand gripping the medic's coat. One of the infantrymen grabbed the medic's arm angrily, too roughly, as if ready to shove him back into the rubble. Ivan's gloved finger slid into position. He could feel the shot forming, breath stabilizing, body aligning with the rifle like a single machine built for death. He didn't want to help the German. He didn't want to help anyone. He wanted the war to make sense again, to divide the world into targets and threats and nothing more. But the image of the medic shielding the child wouldn't leave his mind. Why is he doing this? Ivan asked himself. Why does he care? The answer came slowly, painfully. Because not everyone on a battlefield is looking for someone to kill. Some are trying desperately to save what little remains of the living. Ivan exhaled, long and quiet. He lowered the rifle. For the first time since the siege began, he chose not to shoot, even stayed motionless in the ruined apartment, the cold gnawing at his bones as he watched the medic push forward with the injured boy in his arms. The German soldiers hesitated only a moment before following him, grumbling, their rifles slung low but ready. Ivan adjusted his scope again, tracking them as they moved through the maze of debris. He realized with a jolt of unease that they were heading straight toward one of the front-line checkpoints, a place where Russians and Germans often exchanged fire without warning. If they walked into that zone carrying a Russian child, both sides would assume the worst. Panic prickled at the back of Ivan's neck. The medic didn't seem to understand how thin the line was in this part of the city. A single mistaken movement could turn him, the woman, and the boy into corpses scattered across the snow. Ivan scanned the distant street where the medic was heading. A Soviet patrol was there. 3 men huddled behind a collapsed storefront, scanning the road with rifles drawn. If they spotted a German uniform approaching, they would shoot first and ask questions later. Ivan moved quickly, sliding across the broken floorboards to find a better angle. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. "Don't go that way," he muttered to the medic, though the man could never hear him. The mother seemed to sense the danger too. She tugged at the medic's sleeve, shaking her head urgently, pointing down another alley. But the medic shook his head. His path was clear. He was trying to get the child to a makeshift clinic the Germans had set up in a ruined warehouse. It was closer than the Soviet lines, safer than the streets, and likely the only place he had supplies. The infantry behind him shouted again, urging him to hurry. Ivan saw it all through the lens. Every gesture, every breath of frost, every trembling hand. And with every second that passed, the distance between the German group and the Soviet patrol shrank. Ivan's stomach tightened. If the Soviets fired on sight, which they almost certainly would, the medic would die carrying a child he was trying to save. A child who would be caught in the crossfire because of a misunderstanding. Ivan lifted his rifle again, not to kill, but to warn. He aimed at a metal plate sticking out of the rubble near the Soviet position. He inhaled slowly, letting the familiar rhythm wash through him. Then, with a sharp exhale, he fired. The shot rang across the frozen district, echoing against shattered concrete. Sparks burst from the plate, loud enough to distract the Soviet patrol but not harm them. The soldiers jerked their heads toward the sound, momentarily abandoning their forward watch. Ivan fired again, this time at a distant chimney, another sharp clang. A warning, a message a trained soldier would recognize. Sniper active, stay down. Below, the German medic froze, looking around wildly. The woman clutched the child tighter. The infantry ducked behind rubble, thinking they were the targets. But Ivan wasn't aiming at them. He fired a third shot, this time skipping a bullet across a patch of ice directly in front of the Soviet patrol's position. The Soviets reacted instantly, diving for cover. With their heads down, the line of sight between the two groups snapped shut. The patrol, believing they were being targeted by a German sniper, held their fire. It bought the medic 10 precious seconds, then 20, then a chance. Ivan watched as the medic veered suddenly into a narrow alley to avoid the line of fire entirely, the woman close behind, the child still limp in his arms. They disappeared into the ruins. Ivan lowered the rifle slowly, his breath forming a white cloud around his face. He had just saved a German's life, not by accident, not by hesitating, by choice. The weight of that hit him all at once. His hands trembled, not from the cold, but from the violation of everything he had been taught to obey. "What are you doing, Ivan?" he whispered to himself. He didn't have an answer. He only knew the truth he could no longer ignore. He could not kill a man who chose to save children instead of soldiers. The medic had crossed a line in this war, a line Ivan didn't know still existed. And now, in a moment he couldn't take back, Ivan had crossed it too. Snow kept falling in a thin, relentless curtain as Ivan shifted to another corner of the ruined apartment, his boots crunching on broken plaster. He found a new firing angle that overlooked the alley where the medic had disappeared moments earlier. Through the scope, he caught a glimpse of the man's silhouette moving between collapsed walls, his white armband glowing faintly in the moonlight. The woman stayed close, clutching at his coat as he navigated the debris with the limp child in his arms. Ivan could see the medic's breath forming clouds in the cold air. He was slowing down, exhaustion, fear, or the weight of the child pressing on his nerves. "Keep moving," Ivan whispered as if the medic could somehow hear him. Gunfire rattled in the distance, echoing down the ruined streets. The Germans were pushing forward again on the eastern sector. The Soviets would push back. Between those two unstoppable forces, the medic was a fragile thread crossing a battlefield where mercy was punished and hesitation was fatal. Ivan swept his rifle across the alley, checking every shadow. If any German patrol caught the medic helping a Russian civilian, they'd shoot him for treason. If any Soviet scout saw him carrying a Russian boy, they'd assume he was kidnapping civilians as human shields. Every soldier in the city was trained to fear tricks, traps, and disguises. No one trusted anyone. No one spared anyone. And yet here was a German medic carrying a wounded Russian child through hell. Ivan tracked them until they reached an old warehouse. The roof had collapsed long ago, leaving jagged beams pointing toward the sky like broken bones. A faint lantern glowed inside, likely the German aid station. The medic shouted something to the soldiers guarding the entrance. They hurried over, recognizing the urgency in his voice. One of them cleared a path through the rubble while another took the boy from his arms. Ivan saw the medic sag with relief, hands shaking as he wiped melted snow from his face. He had made it. The child had a chance. For a moment, Ivan allowed himself a rare breath of calm, but calm never lasted in this city. As he scanned again, he caught movement, sharp, purposeful, on the far side of the warehouse. A different group of Germans approached, these in long black coats that made Ivan's stomach clench. SS, unlike ordinary infantry, the SS did not tolerate any deviation from orders, and they certainly did not tolerate compassion. Ivan watched as the SS officer stepped into the light, his expression sharp and suspicious. He spoke to the medic, gesturing aggressively toward the woman, toward the child being carried inside. The medic tried to explain, raising his hands, voice urgent but steady. The officer cut him off with a shout. The infantrymen around them stiffened, uncertain. The SS officer advanced, jabbing a finger into the medic's chest, his voice rising. Ivan could read the tension from hundreds of meters away. The officer wasn't questioning. He was accusing. The medic was defending. The line between being a soldier and a criminal was razor thin under the SS. With one wrong sentence, one wrong breath, the medic could be dragged into the street and shot. Ivan steadied his rifle. He didn't know why. He just did. The woman clutched her coat tighter, shrinking into herself. The child disappeared into the warehouse, carried inside by a German private who looked like he didn't want any part of this argument. The medic stood his ground. His posture was resolute, defiant even. He pointed toward the wounded boy inside the warehouse, speaking firmly. The SS officer stepped closer, the tension thickening like ice. Ivan could see the shape of a Luger at the officer's hip. He could see the officer's hand drifting toward it. He could see how easily this scene could end in execution. Ivan's finger moved to the trigger before he consciously decided anything. He didn't aim to kill the SS officer. He knew the consequences of that were too great. But he could distract him, confuse him, delay him, or frighten him enough to pause. He inhaled slowly, the building groaning under a gust of wind. The officer's hand brushed the grip of the pistol. Ivan fired. The bullet struck a rusted pipe 3 meters behind the SS officer with a deafening metallic scream. Sparks burst outward, showering the area in orange light. The officer spun, shouting orders, soldiers ducking instinctively. The medic flinched but didn't run. Ivan chambered another round, his scope sweeping over the scene. The SS were now scanning rooftops, convinced a Soviet sniper was targeting them. Good. Confusion was better than blood. The medic pressed a hand to the woman's shoulder, urging her toward the warehouse. She hesitated only a heartbeat before disappearing inside. The officer barked commands, sending soldiers scrambling through the rubble to find the sniper. They ran in the wrong direction, away from the warehouse, away from the medic. Ivan lowered the rifle again, pulse slow and steady. He had protected the medic twice now. He didn't know why. He didn't allow himself to think about why. But the truth hovered at the edge of his thoughts, cold and undeniable. He had seen too much of the man's humanity to let the war erase it. For the first time, Ivan wondered if the medic, somewhere in that ruined city, had also noticed him. Had realized someone in the shadows was choosing not to kill him. Had sensed the invisible line connecting their fates. But there was no time for questions. The war didn't pause. It pressed forward. And Ivan knew the next hours would decide everything for the medic, for the child, and for himself. The night deepened, swallowing the ruined city in a silence broken only by distant artillery. Ivan remained at his sniper post, but something inside him had shifted so profoundly that he no longer felt like the same man who had climbed the stairs that morning. He kept the medic's last known position in his scope, scanning for any sign of danger. The SS squad, still convinced a Soviet sharpshooter was hunting them, continued to fan out through the rubble, searching alleyways in the wrong direction. They were confused, nervous, and for the moment, harmless. But Ivan knew confusion never lasted long in war. Eventually, suspicion returned, violence followed, and someone always paid the price. Inside the half-collapsed warehouse, Ivan saw movement, lanterns swinging, shadows shifting. The medic emerged again, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cold. His hands trembled with fatigue and fear. He spoke quietly to the German private who had carried the boy inside, motioning toward the barricaded windows. Ivan lifted the scope and saw something that froze his breath. The medic wasn't leaving. He was preparing to defend the warehouse. The German clinic had wounded soldiers inside, but now it held something far more dangerous: a Russian child and his mother. If the SS discovered them, the medic would be shot for treason on the spot. Yet instead of running, he stayed, protecting strangers the war told him to hate. Ivan adjusted the scope, studying the man's face. He expected fear, hesitation, calculation. Instead, he saw something entirely different: resolve. The kind of resolve that came only from a decision already made deep inside the soul. The medic glanced upward toward the rooftops, scanning the skyline for threats. For a split second, the scope aligned perfectly with his eyes. Ivan felt an unexpected jolt in his chest, as if the medic somehow knew someone was watching him, someone who had spared him, someone whose invisible presence had shaped his fate all day. There was no time to wonder about it. Shouting erupted near the far corner of the square. The SS had found the woman's footprints. They were heading back toward the warehouse. Ivan cursed under his breath and snapped the rifle into position. He couldn't stop a squad of armed soldiers alone, but he could delay them, manipulate them, redirect them, anything to buy the medic a chance. The lead SS soldier approached the warehouse cautiously, pistol drawn. Ivan fired. The bullet shattered a stone column inches from the soldier's head, spraying shards across the snow. The squad dropped instantly, taking cover behind debris. Another shot rang out, this time into a rusted beam above them, causing it to collapse loudly. The soldiers cursed, disoriented, unsure where the sniper was positioned. But they kept moving. Ivan chambered another round, exhaled, and fired again, this time into a patch of snow behind the squad, creating a plume that looked like an impact from a heavy-caliber rifle. The SS officer froze, eyes darting across the rooftops. Fear flickered in his expression. He barked new orders, quieter this time, and signaled his men to retreat and flank the position instead of pushing forward. They backed away. The medic, watching from inside the warehouse, closed his eyes for a brief moment, relief washing over him like a wave. He turned, disappearing back inside, likely to tend to the child again. Ivan lowered his rifle. His muscles finally began to tremble, not from cold but from the emotional weight crushing him. He had protected a German as if he were a comrade. He had saved a child not by obeying orders, but by disobeying everything the war demanded. But the moment of quiet shattered when footsteps thudded behind him. Ivan turned sharply. A Soviet officer stood in the doorway of the ruined apartment, his face pale, his expression unreadable. He had witnessed enough. Maybe the warning shots, maybe Ivan's hesitation, maybe his deliberate refusals. "Ivan Mikhailov," the officer said softly, almost gently. "Who are you shooting at tonight?" The question held accusation, danger, and fate. Ivan didn't answer. He simply looked back through the broken window toward the distant warehouse, where a German medic was saving a Russian child. Alive only because Ivan refused to pull the trigger. The Soviet officer followed his gaze, saw nothing but shadows and snow, and slowly lowered his pistol. He didn't understand the full story. Maybe he never would, but he saw something in Ivan's eyes that made him step back instead of forward. "Whatever you're doing," he murmured, "finish it, and then pray no one else finds out." He turned and left. Ivan let out a slow, shuddering breath. He sank behind the sandbags, the weight of the war settling on his shoulders in a way he had never felt before. Somewhere across the ruins, a medic continued his quiet rebellion, saving lives in a place built for death. And Ivan, for the rest of the night, kept watch over him, not as enemy and soldier, but as two men bound by the one human rule the war had failed to destroy. Some lives must be protected, no matter what uniform you wear.